Fong is a serial entrepreneur based in Hong Kong. Ian's experience ranges from opening up over 10 cafes after graduating from Cambridge with a degree in manufacturing engineering to setting up a tailor shop, and now your work building beautiful keyboards and coffee accessories with Brazen Studio. Ian, thank you so much for all your time.
Great, thanks for having me.
Could you tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and what that's been like?
Yeah, so I was in Cambridge in the UK, and then so I spent 4 years there from my university. And so I guess my entrepreneurial journey probably started there because I joined a business plan competition while I was there. We got into the finals, and then we had this fancy like black tie dinner and everything in the British Museum. And so I think that was where we caught the bug. And I thought, oh, maybe this is something that I would enjoy doing. Yeah, after graduation, I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then so yeah, I ended up joining this coffee shop chain, San Francisco Coffee. They're based in Malaysia, but run by an American. And then they were just coming to Hong Kong. I thought it'd be an interesting opportunity to join a company that's just starting up in Hong Kong, and then maybe learn something about entrepreneurship and building a business there. Yeah, I worked under the boss of that business, and I helped with business development, opening new shops, so looking for shop spaces, and I learned all about coffee there as well. So it was there that I picked up my passion for coffee. Those first two jobs, yeah, I was learning about entrepreneurship, learning about what makes them tick, and how to succeed in business, even though they both weren't very successful businesses. So I closed my fair share of coffee shops as well. So it was after those two experiences, so maybe about 6 years in food and beverage, that that I felt that I was ready to start my own journey.
What are the things that you learned opening and I guess also closing some cafes?
Definitely learning what traits an entrepreneur has, and also what that lifestyle's like, and what skills you need to succeed. I think who would be suited to be an entrepreneur, the sort of drive and the passion and the grit it takes. And I guess the other thing about entrepreneurs is seeing how they react to adversity. I would say entrepreneurs face like a new crisis every day, and so I kind of learned how to deal with that. At the beginning, I would face something that I would think is, oh, it's a huge problem, but the entrepreneur would be like, oh, well, we can fix that. And you kind of really get a feel for what it takes to succeed.
How did you go from your experience in food and beverage and working for other entrepreneurs to opening cuffs?
So I guess the other thing that I learned during my 6 years in food and beverage is that it's brutal. It's very difficult. I opened like 10 stores and probably closed like 5 at least. I really had a passion for food and for coffee especially. So I did consider that as something that I could start. And then I realized it's hard to differentiate itself, and it's just such a brutal industry, especially in Hong Kong, where the rents are some of the highest in the world. So I kind of shied away from F&B, and then at the time I also went to a lot of different entrepreneurship events. And I remember someone saying after the best way to get inspired to start a business is to look for problems in your everyday life. And so for me, that was buying shirts that fit. I would go to like say Marks and Spencer, and then I would try on 10 white shirts, and all of them would be wrong in some way. Then I realized that Hong Kong is quite famous for custom tailoring. So ever since like I think the 50s and 60s and 70s, I'm having trouble finding shirts that fit, and so I might as well go try a tailor. And so I remember going to a tailor. He was in a tiny shop on the corner of the street, and he was probably 70 something, but he was super nice. I could choose the fabrics, and the price was the same as, or even cheaper than, buying from say Zara or Gap. That was really the inspiration, that there was this amazing product, custom made. You could choose your fabrics, buttons, details, custom made to your body, and the fabrics were higher quality, and it was also cheaper than buying off the rack. So I guess through my market research, I realized that there was this big group of people that had the same problem as me. They couldn't buy shirts that fit. And yet at the same time, Hong Kong's famous for custom tailoring, and there were hundreds of tailors. But somehow these two groups weren't meeting. So I thought that was really strange. And then I realized that all the tailors in Hong Kong, they're all about, at least 60, 70. They all started out, like 20, 30 years ago, and they're all very old. And they're very, old school, old fashioned. And then it wasn't very user friendly. If you want to buy a white shirt, then, he would give you a book like this thick with, 200 white fabrics, and you'd have no clue how to choose, and you didn't know what kind of collars you can choose. And it was just so foreign to, younger people, it never occurred to them that they could have shirts made at a tailor at a similar price point. And so what I did was I created a custom tailor that uses the talents of those same local tailors, but repackaged it in a way that it could address all those pain points that was preventing all these younger, professionals from accessing that tailoring talent. Yeah, and so I created Cuffs, which is like a sort of branded younger tailor shop company. So we had a couple of stores, one in sort of central, the main sort of CBD area, one in the shopping district in Causeway Bay. Yeah, so we had a physical store, and we were known as like the cool tailor. So we had a very clear positioning. We had all these different tools and features that would address all those pain points that I mentioned. So we had a shirt bar. So I guess from my engineering days, I designed this flow chart. Step 1, choose the collar. Step 2, choose this and the fabric. And then we would also curate the fabrics. So we had an in-house designer, and then he would curate the fabrics. So instead of 200 fabrics, he would have 10 that we've chosen that are like in style, in season, good quality. So we would curate. So a lot of what we were doing was, we would call ourselves like the iPhone of tailors. So the traditional tailors might be like the Android of the tailoring world. So they have a lot of features and benefits, but then but it's just too much, right? And so we simplified everything and repackaged it so it looked really nice and much easier to understand. And then pretty much from day one, it really took off. So that was kind of how I jumped from being an employee to starting my own business.
Yeah, I love that you made it more approachable. And I think the whole thing of having 200 choices and narrowing that to 10 for the user, like, I think that definitely makes sense, especially for like young people. It's like, we want it now. Like, we don't want to have to like do research. There's so much information. So
yeah, and not even for young people. There was like a case study, and then they were selling jam in a supermarket. There's a promoter. And like on day 1, they had 16 jams, and then on day 2 they had 5, and then the day 2 the sales were like double of day 1 just because there's too much choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I feel like there's been countless times where when I had more time, when I was a student, I would go to a CVS, like a drugstore, and see that there were 30 different types of toothpaste. And then I would just look at it, try to read the differences and the prices, and then I would be like, you know what? I can wait another week until I really need toothpaste.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Too much choice.
With Cuffs, when you're doing that market research and trying to figure out, like, solve your own problem, but really assess like what was going on in the market already, how long was that period? Did that overlap with your previous job?
It didn't overlap with my previous job. Yeah, probably all in all, maybe 9 months, I think. So from coming up with the idea, and then we did like a beta test. I made a foam board with like the shirt bar on it, and then I found some like books of fabric from a tailor, and then I sat in the coffee shop, and then I would invite friends over, and then they would pick out fabrics, and then I would measure them as well, because obviously I don't have a fashion background. I found like a really cool like old school tailor to show me the ropes, so he would teach me how to measure. So I had this like this beta testing where I would sit in a coffee shop, and then my friends would come over, and then go through the flow chart, and then have shirts made. I think that was a good way to assess how feasible it was. At least I could evaluate whether it would take me 10 years to be able to measure someone, or 10 weeks. At least I could have some data points. And then so after that validation, then I pitched some of my kind of like childhood friends, to put in some money for the startup capital.
And that relates, really well to my next question, which was, what were the hardest things about getting Cuffs like off its feet and getting it profitable?
I would say the biggest challenges are always your team. So finding the right people and keeping them around, especially in a place like Hong Kong, staff turnover is quite high. Yeah, I think our biggest challenge was finding and retaining talent. So there's obviously the old school tailors, and then also the frontline staff that would be the ones that talk to the customer and introduce the different fabrics, or like the fashion designer, that kind of thing. So I think definitely the team. It was super great when everyone's clicking, and then everything's going really smoothly, and then maybe one of the staff would like send me an email, hey, can we chat, Ian? And then that would sort of send shivers down my spine, because then it would mean most likely they were probably going to leave for somewhere else, and then I would have to probably spend another 3 months looking for someone to take their place. And then in the meantime, I would have to be, stuck in the store to help out, and then which would pull me away from, other more important jobs. So definitely team, I think, is the hardest thing. And also related to that is working with these really old school tailors, pretty much like any artists, because that's what they are. They're artists. They're really strong characters. They're really interesting characters, and they're all, like 60 is young in this industry. It's very hard to get them to try new things, especially with the shirts. We had some pretty crazy designs, like sort of patchwork, like comme des garçons kind of thing. And then, but luckily I had a really cool shirt tailor, who we nicknamed OG. He's still kicking. We used to call him OG because we just called him old guy. So he ended up being called OG. I still see him. He was like 80 something when he was working with us. So he was ancient, but he was he was incredible. He was so energetic, and he had like a crazy memory. So that was the shirts. So basically the tailoring team for shirts and suits is different, and then we went through a whole bunch of different like suit tailors. Again, they're quite strong characters, or they'll have like some family troubles or something. And so we went through a whole bunch before we settled on a good sort of back end team. But it's also really fun, just really interesting interacting with these really interesting characters.
What did you learn about people management through Cuffs? Like you mentioned that tailors, there are these like characters, strong characters, and then it's hard to retain like the frontline staff as well. And you mentioned the tailors are often much older than you. What did you learn about people management and your management style?
Through experience, you kind of learn how to connect with people from different backgrounds. So I think that's pretty helpful. So, my staff would be like quite local Hong Kong Chinese. And then, the customers, a lot of them would be, Western or English speaking. And then the tailoring team would be, old school, like local Hong Kong, like really salt of the earth people. Baptism by fire, just really learning how to interact with these people. Like, for example, when we were looking for our first tailor, who ended up being OG, the way we did it was there's a building in Hong Kong. It's a very kind of ghetto building in the middle of the city, a little bit like the Kowloon walled city, which was the inspiration for Cyberpunk. That's kind of what it's like, and that's where all the tailors hang out. So it's a really interesting subculture. So you'd walk through this building, and then you would walk past the doorway, and it would be like a time machine. Like the fans are like still from like the 70s, are all yellow, but they're still using them. Super interesting. But yeah, the way we found our first tailoring team was really just literally going to the top floor of this building, going and knocking on doors. And then the way it works is that it's like if you're not introduced or anything, and especially if you're, some young buck like I was, they really don't give you the time of day. So you knock on the door and you'd be like, oh, who sent you? Or like, no, I'm really busy. I'm like semi-retired. Just go away, leave me alone. So that was literally what we did. We went top to bottom and like knocked on all the doors and introduced ourselves and try and convince them to join us on this sort of crazy venture. So a lot of it was just trial and error, I think. I guess the other thing you learn is, how to inspire your team. Yeah, like the passion that the entrepreneur has is super important. It's important because I think passion is like infectious. Whatever you're doing, whether you're talking to like investors, to clients, or to your own staff, if your heart's not really in it, that's like super obvious. But if you're really excited, even if you're telling them that we're gonna go and do some crazy kind of impossible sounding project, right? It's really the passion and the excitement that's kind of infectious. And so if you don't have that, it's kind of hard to carry people along with you.
Right. That's one of those things that from a gut level, you can just tell if it's fake or if it's real,
Yeah.
like your belief in something.
Exactly.
Was that passion and maybe the resulting motivation always in you with Cuffs and maybe with Brazen Studio as well? Or is that something that kind of comes and goes and you just have to like keep reminding yourself? Like, how do you keep yourself motivated and passionate about what you do instead of being like, oh, there's like, a lot of problems I need to tackle and a lot of new things I need to think about. Like, how did you do that?
With a tailor shop, definitely like emotional roller coaster, definitely huge highs and lows. There are a lot of points, especially starting up, where it was like, are you really, you know, with your Cambridge education, are you really going to go and start like a tailor shop? And then you would have all these self doubts, or people would doubt you. And then what I used to fall back on is that, okay, if I don't start this, then no one's going to make these super cool shirts that I really like wearing, right? So that was something I really came back to, and that would kind of reaffirm the validity of what I was doing, is that, you know, if I didn't make it, then nobody else will. Because basically our tagline was designer style custom fit. So we would marry the sort of old school technical side with like a modern fashion sensibility, and we're pretty much the only ones to do that. Or we're the first ones to do that in the Hong Kong market. We actually kind of kicked off a wave of these cooler, you know, more fashionable tailors. But yeah, like we're pretty much the only tailor of its kind. I could obviously make formal wear, like formal shirts, but we could make like, you know, camp collars, or, you know, we would source cool fabrics from Tokyo, you know, with like, you know, floral patterns, or we'd make, you know, crazy patchwork designs. And so we're really the only ones on the market that could do that. And so one of the things I would tell myself when, you know, when I was having doubts is that, okay, if I don't do this, then, you know, where am I going to buy my shirts? I would have to go back to buying them off the rack or something, or buy really boring shirts from the existing local tailors. So that's definitely something that I would fall back on. You know, that kind of illustrates why it's important that, or why it's useful to get inspired by, or look for a business idea from your own everyday struggles or problems that you want to solve. Especially having like years of entrepreneurship under your belt, then you kind of get used to the ups and downs, like the emotional roller coaster. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, before when I was working for my previous bosses, it would amaze me like how cool they would react to like basically a genuine crisis. I learned how to do that as well. You know, there's a crisis every day. The landlord wants to jack up the rent. What do we do? You know, we're gonna move out in a month or something. Yeah, and it's like, okay, cool. We'll just find another shop or whatever. Yeah, I guess through doing it, you kind of learn how to deal with crises and then putting out fires.
Do you think it's like you develop like a thicker muscle of problem solving, or do you think you just develop a thicker skin of being like, okay, like this is not the first time I'm faced with a pretty troubling fact?
I would kind of subscribe to like stoicism. Some of the elements of stoicism. Like I haven't really dealt much into it, but then, you know, it's all about separating, you know, issues that you can affect or alter, and ones that you can't. And then there's no point stressing over things that you can't control. So you basically respond by, rather than reacting to the situation at hand, you can control how you react to it. So there might be a problem, and so you might freak out, you know, if you weren't really self-aware, but then you can kind of catch yourself and think, okay, hey, this is stressing me out, you know, but I can choose how I react to this situation. So I think, yeah, definitely through all those challenges, you learn to become more self-aware, and then learn to control those emotions.
Yeah. Would you say you are typically more of like a level-headed or, you know, logical person, or what's like your mix between being able to just like you try to reason and observe the world through the lens of like logic versus kind of thinking about, you mentioned the importance of connecting with different kinds of people, like thinking about just people as they are, and sensing things and seeing things for what they are?
Yeah, I think I'm a mix of both. So yeah, definitely there's the engineering side, which is, yeah, like very logical, like reason. You assess the situation, like what can I do if I can't affect this? Then there's no point freaking out about it, you know, or what can I do, or like analyze it, go back to first principles, you know, how can I solve this problem? I definitely have a lot of that, but also, yeah, I definitely have a creative side, you know, and an eye for design, and yeah, and again, that passion, like really, I get excited about cool ideas, and then you know, I have that ability to infect those around me with that passion, I think. So I think that's part of like what I do is I'm a mix of like technology or logical things, and also like a more artistic side. So even with what I'm doing now, you know, making keyboards and coffee, so everything we make is from a sort of engineered stone compounds. We cast it in a mold, so we pigment it, so we can make all these crazy designs. And so there's a lot of design related skills there, but at the same time interesting in that we employ technology as well. So like 3D printing or CNC laser cutting. We use technical tools to make different shapes, and then we can make molds from those. I think it's both a strength and a weakness. So I'm very like all round, but maybe like a jack of all trades.
And I guess that's what you need when you have a different kind of like problem every day, and there's a lot that you need to. It's like always a game of chicken and egg, and you need to hire people
For
with
sure.
like all these different skills. So it definitely, I'm guessing, pays to be a well-rounded person. And I think what you're saying about your work with Brazen now being this, I can see more the intersection of your degree, like what you studied at Cambridge, manufacturing engineering, with that artistic side that maybe is pretty obvious with your work with cuffs as well. So tell us about how you ended up pivoting from cuffs to Brazen to making keyboards and coffee gear.
So yeah, I ran cuffs for 8.5 years. Yeah, there were ups and downs, and then we were doing pretty well, and then we're kind of finally on track. And then, yeah, 2019 we had the sort of political unrest in Hong Kong, and there's like tear gas everywhere. Like, yeah, our shop in Central, there would be protests there pretty often, and then so we get like tear gas drifting into our shop, and they'd be like, "Okay, guys, we got to shut the doors." It was pretty crazy time. Yeah, and then I live like in the city center, so there would be like tear gas below my house. Yeah, pretty bonkers, especially for somewhere like Hong Kong, which everyone thinks is like very safe. It was like the political unrest, and so it was a very toxic environment at the time, and so people were in like a really bad mood, and then they would go straight home after work, because they weren't sure if there was going to be more protests or any like tear gas anywhere, and so obviously that would affect shopping habits, and so yeah, definitely sales fell a lot during that time, and then yeah, and then so that was like half of 2019, and then beginning of 2020. Yeah, it was protests and then COVID, so it was kind of a double whammy for us. And so with COVID, people obviously working from home, and then again, after they get off work, they'll go straight home because they don't want to expose themselves more than they need to. And so yeah, get like sales fell more again. So definitely, I think the writing was on the wall then that it's time to get out. And then I think at the time as well, I've been doing it for 8.5 years, and it was doing okay, but I didn't see it really blowing up anytime soon. And there's definitely some fatigue involved, I think, doing the same project for this amount of time. So I took it as a sign that maybe this is a good time to call it a day and start a new project. So yeah, so that was beginning of 2020. So, which is, in hindsight, it was good that we closed early, because at the time, no one knew how long it was going to last. Certainly not 3 years or 2 years.
Right.
Even at the time, it was maybe it'll be over in 6 months, but we probably couldn't survive that long. So let's just close it. But if we had persevered, and then yeah, we probably would have suffered more pain than we needed to, I think. And then obviously post COVID, there was the whole paradigm shift in in hybrid or work from home, and like the whole culture of going to meetings, in-person meetings, and dressing up, all that changed a lot. And so I reckon even if we stuck around, like it would have been a tough market, I think. So yeah, so that was beginning of 2020. And then, yeah, so I already had some ideas of what I wanted to do next. I really enjoy cooking, so definitely a foodie. So other than coffee, I was really into making pizza. And so actually it was always one of my ideas to start a pizza company. So like Neapolitan style, like with like a puffy crust, baked in 60 to 90 seconds. Yeah, I was pretty much all in on that. And then yeah, I was looking for shops, and then we had like the branding done. I bid for 3 or 4 stores maybe to open a pizza store, and then for whatever reason, the stars didn't align. Maybe like the landlord decided to rent it to someone else or whatever. But there's one shop which we thought we were pretty close to getting, and then yeah, so I was doing research on interior design trends, like on Pinterest, and one of the trends was terrazzo, like a stone pattern. So like you have like marble base color with like little flecks of color in it. So that's like a terrazzo pattern. And then I discovered that you can make your own terrazzo with this material that I found. And then at the same time, my old like crappy Dell keyboard broke, and so I was in the market for a new keyboard, and then I was doing research, and then I kind of discovered this whole subculture of high-end mechanical keyboards.
Yeah.
And then somehow I had this crazy idea: what if we use this material to make a stone keyboard? And so yeah, so I ordered some material from the UK and then made a prototype and then posted it online, and people were like, "Can I buy that?" And then like, yeah, the people wanted to buy it, and then they were asking me,
Yeah.
when it's going to go on sale, and so yeah, so then that was kind of the genesis of Brazen Studio.
You mentioned that you posted on Reddit, right? And it like low-key blew up. It's cool that you do these like experiments and kind of test your idea and get a litmus test for like the demand for it, the interest in it, and then you proceed forward. Was it scary? Kind of going from cuffs, knowing how to shut down, or do you think you had enough things over the 8+ years that you wanted to do that when you were getting started and thinking about the keyboards, you were in this state of mind of, okay, there's a pizza business, there's this new keyboard and interior design trend that I can kind of hop in on and create something beautiful and useful. Like, was that like, what was that transition like for you? Did you feel prepared for a new challenge?
I think it was fun, actually. In some ways, it was kind of a breath of fresh air,
Yeah.
closing down cuffs and moving away from something that I've been staring at for the last 8 years. So it was exciting and fun, I think, to think about what I was going to do next. So yeah, I think it was a pretty smooth transition. And then there wasn't that much pressure as well, because it's the overheads for this style of business is much lower. So back then I was working out of a co-working space. So, very minimal rents and very low overheads. And then I could just make stuff, post it online, see what the reaction is. And then I was still keen on the pizza business, but then, I figured from my experience in F&B that, this was probably a better or less painful business to be in, I think. So much lower overheads. And then less pressure with regards to like staffing and all that. And so, yeah, definitely much lower CapEx. So I figured, like, in some ways I was like, okay, I spent all this time building this pizza brand. So it seems kind of stupid to abandon it for something new. But then, yeah, I knew sort of gut feeling that this was going to be a more, like a less painful business, I think. Less risk, less pressure, fewer overheads.
Were you the designer of the keyboards, or like, how did that work?
Yeah, I created the prototypes. And then actually later my wife joined me. And then so she spent 2 years working with me. So and then we kind of shared design duties, and we shared shared different duties.
That's awesome.
In the business.
You work in a corporate setting, you're kind of like doing your job, but for you turn these things that you're into and then you kind of run for it and create a business out of it. How did you did you start working on coffee gear like later on? Because those two things seem quite different, other than the connector that's like you.
So we actually did both coffee and keyboard gear sort of in parallel. I'm passionate about both these things, and as I learned before, it's so important to be passionate about the business you're building or the product you're creating. So that's definitely a good check. Like, should I go ahead with this idea? Like, am I passionate about it? I think it was like Tony Hsieh, who was like the founder of Zappos, like the shoe brand. Like he was a pretty well-known entrepreneur at the time. And then I went to a talk that he did, and he was saying the way to think about whether you should do this business is, if in 10 years you didn't make any money, would you still do it? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably a good thing to pursue. So that was definitely something that I took to heart, I think. There is definitely some overlap between the coffee nerds and the keyboard nerds. So definitely when I post, sometimes I cross post, like coffee products, with the keyboard crowd, and then, I know what machine that is. And then I guess our positioning is that we make cool stuff for kind of nerdy verticals. So whether it's keyboards or coffee, they're very much passion-driven hobbies. So in that way, they're quite similar. That people they're willing to spend money on something really special. They're very passionate about it. The markets are similar in that, they're very niche, which has its upsides and downsides. But for us, it's worked out well for us. Just targeting these very, very narrow niches. The overarching positioning now is that we make cool stuff for your home workspace. So for people that work from
Yeah.
home, whether it's your keyboard or your home coffee bar, we make cool stuff for your, to keep you productive. And then we're coming out with some new
Yeah.
products. Um,
Ooh. Have you always had the entrepreneurial spirit? Like, what made you take the leap from studying manufacturing engineering and going into F&B and doing all these different things? Like, where does that come from? Did you have role models growing up, or friends that inspired you, or famous entrepreneurs that inspired you? Like,
I wouldn't say that, I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur from a young age, but,
yeah,
I would like to tinker or like, um, build my own solutions to problems. I definitely was always making things as a kid, I think, but I think the realization about becoming an entrepreneur probably in Cambridge, I think, partially because I didn't know what else I wanted to do, and then also just it seemed to click for me. It was really fun, working with my friends and pitching people, trying to convince them that your idea is a good one. And back then that was I graduated in 2003, so that was kind of just the start of the kind of .com, startup, the whole startup
yeah.
scene. So that also contributed to the sexiness of becoming an entrepreneur.
What what do you see as your, like, major strengths, and also what do you see as your maybe innate or just skill wise your weaknesses? And
My strengths are like I'm very well rounded, like jack of all trades, and so that's really great for when you're just starting out, and then you have to wear many hats, and then you don't have like a huge budget to do things. So a lot of it's DIY. Learning to make content, videography,
yeah.
photography. So I'm like really good at being resourceful and
Hmm.
scrappy and bootstrapping things. I think. I think I'm less good at being like a disciplined sort of like manager and running a larger scale business, I would say. So I think definitely my strengths lie in being resourceful, problem solving, being creative. I think that's always been a strong point. Is from tailoring to the keyboards, like with cuffs, we've gotten so much media. So we're like in Forbes, like Newsweek,
Mm,
and everything.
that's
We're like
awesome.
nominated for like an award by like
Whoa.
WGSN and all that. I kind of knew I had that ability to be able to make stuff that moves people, I guess. They see that and think, oh, that's so cool. And with the keyboards, we got picked up by a lot of like design blogs. I do have a good eye for design, the creative side, but less so on like the harder skills, sort of uh, running and scaling a business.
What has been your approach to getting your products in people's hands?
Sure. So like I said, our products are super niche. So mechanical keyboards
Mhm.
and coffee gear, and so even within mechanical keyboards, we're like a niche of a niche of a niche.
Yeah.
So you, so within custom keyboards, there's different sizes. So
Mhm.
uh, so we make 60% keyboards, so no function row, no arrow keys. Um, and so so that's a niche within the mechanical keyboards. And then like our mounting style, and then we do like really wacky designs, stone keyboards, which is not for everyone. So uh, if you were to draw a Venn diagram, it kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller. um,
Yeah.
so so that's bad in that like the overall market size
Mhm.
isn't huge, like the pie isn't that big, but
Mhm.
then it's really good in that it's very easy to reach my target market. So
Mhm.
I don't have to blow a lot of money on ads. We've done almost zero
Mm,
paid advertising.
that's
So all of
awesome.
it's like word of mouth or like, posting on Reddit or Facebook, Instagram. I guess what we have done is sort of send products to influencers. So I think that really
Mhm.
works. Because, so there's definitely this whole ecosphere of, keyboard and sort of desk product influencers. And so I think that's just super targeted because the people that follow them will be people that are interested in keyboards. You won't get some randoms following this guy, right? So that to me is a lot more effective than
Wait.
you know trying to use the Instagram or Facebook tools, the ad managers to attempt to target people that might be suitable. I always find from my experience that it's kind of like throwing money at a black box. You have no idea what's happening. And so for us, yeah, we're because it's so niche, we have to be super targeted, but that also means we don't have to blow a ton of money on advertising to get in front of eyeballs. Um, Vast majority of our customers are overseas, so only a few in Hong Kong, and then yeah, we're direct to consumer, so we sell everything on our website. We also have an Etsy store, but yeah, so it's all B2C. Yeah, and we reach them. Yeah, a lot of it's through Instagram, through the Etsy store, yeah, and working with influencers and content creators.
It's funny you say that because as soon as you said like the working with influencers, I was thinking about those YouTube thumbnails that have like a really aesthetic keyboard. Do you work with like keyboard reviews or more like lifestyle vlogs?
Yeah. So pretty much. So like literally what they do is they build keyboards on Twitch, or like they
nice.
They'll do sound tests. So I don't know if you've seen those where it's like ASMR. Because these keyboard nerds love. A big part of it is like the sound of the keyboard. So it might sound marbly or bubbly or really deep or really clacky.
This is like
depending
wine.
on your preferences, and so they'll do sound tests. Yeah, I mean it's just like any hobby. You'll have these crazy nuances and little like subcultures. Yeah, so definitely there's keyboard influencers. There's some that are more tangential or more general sort of lifestyle influencers, but they also have a big keyboard following, I think. Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely a great way to ensure that your resources are spent in a very targeted way.
What advice would you have given yourself at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey?
Trust your gut. So I know it sounds corny, but quite often your gut feeling is pretty accurate. If you think about whether this product's going to succeed or not, your brain might think, oh, this is going to be great, and then but kind of deep down you might have your gut feeling is, oh, maybe this is going to flop, and then it usually does. So I think trust your gut, and also I guess think big. So I guess one of the things I learned working with those entrepreneurs in the early days is you would see how they would embark on a project that seems way out of our league or impossible, but then it would turn out great, and then you kind of realize sometimes like regular non-entrepreneurs will be very bounded in what they're comfortable with, and they won't really push themselves. That's definitely something I applied later on is realizing that my staff would have all these doubts because it seemed like a really impossible task, and then it would feel great when I would push them to succeed, and then we'd do a really good job, and then you can see in their faces that they have buy-in now because they've seen I've proven myself that like, oh, they had their doubts, but then I came through, and then that's really good for earning their respect and like morale and everything. So yeah, thinking big, I think, is a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one because we all have this like very human innate resistance to change, and I think when you hear something different just by virtue of being different or thinking bigger, like your first response is this like, I don't agree or I don't like this, but then eventually if you keep hearing it, like it does like eventually trickle down into your brain, so I think like the ability to think big, and then like you said, if you're able to execute on that big vision, that's how you earn people's trust and respect. So where can the audience find you, online or in person?
Yeah, so brazenstudio.co is where our website is. And then we actually have 2 Instagrams. So the keyboard one is at Brazen Studio, and then the coffee one is at Brazen Workshop.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Ian, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.